Hello everyone, my name is Anup Poddar. So today I am going to discuss about unit number 4 input output organization, lecture number 24. Now let us go through the contents that we are going to discuss in this video. We are going to discuss about exceptions. The term exceptions is used to refer to any event that causes an interruption. Hence, input output interrupts are one example of exception. So exceptions are different from interrupts. So exception used to refer any event that has caused an interruption. So why the interruption has been occurred? So what caused that interruption? So that cause is nothing but the exception. So input output interrupts are one example of exception. Recovery from errors. Now exception occurs, how to recover from that errors in a program. So the computer uses a variety of techniques to ensure that all hardware components are operating properly. So for example, many computers include an error checking code in the main memory, which allows detection of errors in the stored data. So if an error occurs, control hardware detects it and informs the processor by raising an interrupt. When an exception processing is initiated as a result of errors, so at this time processor will suspend the program being executed and starts an exception service routine. So once a routine takes an appropriate action to recover that error or to inform the user about it. When an interrupt is caused by an error, so if interrupt is caused because of an error or execution of interrupted instruction cannot usually be completed and the processor begins exception processing immediately. In this case, what is called as debugging. So system software usually includes a program called as debugger. So it actually helps the programmers find errors in the program. The debugger uses exception to provide two important facilities called as trace and breakpoints. So when a processor is operating in the trace modes, an exception occurs after the execution of every instruction using the debugging program as an exception service routine. So the debugging program enables the user to examine the contents of registers, memory locations and so on. So on returning from the debugging program, the next instruction in the program being debugged is executed. Then the debugging program is activated again. The trace exception is disabled during the execution of debugging program. So this is how debugging is done. Next we'll go what is privilege exception. Now to protect the operating system of a computer from being corrupted by a user program. Now if you want to protect the user from any corrupted program, certain instructions can be executed only while the processor is in supervised mode. So this is called as privilege instructions. For example, when a processor is running in the user mode, suppose a processor is there, it is running in the user mode, it will not execute an instruction that changes the priority level of the processor or that enables the user program to access areas in the computer memory. So an attempt to execute such an instruction will produce an privilege exception which causes the processor to switch from supervisor mode and begin appropriate routine. So now we will go to what is direct memory access or DMA. So it's a process of transferring a block of data directly between external device and the main memory. So here the transfer of data takes place directly from memory main memory to the external device. So here processor is not involved. Using TMA, large blocks of data can be transferred at high speed. So here transfer of data takes place at a high speed. So special control unit is provided to transfer the data. Now DMA transfers are performed by a control circuitry. Okay, it's a part of a input output device interface. So this circuit is referred as DMA controller. Okay, so DMA controller is to coordinate the device interface. Now DMA controller performs the functions which are carried out by the processor while accessing the main memory. So DMA controller performs the same functions as the functions performed by a processor. For each word transfer, it provides the memory address and all bus signals that control the data transfer. Now to transfer blocks of data, the DMA controller must increment the memory address for successive words and keep track of the number of transfer. So if you want to transfer the content from in the main memory and extra device, it should first increment the memory address for successive words that are transferring and also keep track of number of transfers. Now to initiate the transfer of a block of words, first the processor sends the starting address. Okay. Now the number of words in the block as well as the direction of transfer. Okay. So on receiving the information, the DMA controller will proceed to perform the requested operation. Now when the entire block has been transferred, now the controller will inform the processor by raising an interrupt signal. Okay. So once you have transferred the entire block, the processor will raise the interrupt signal. So after a DMA transfer is completed, the processor can return to the program that requests the transfer. Now to how to initiate the transfer of block of words is, the processor will first send the starting address, okay, the number of words in the block and the direction of transfer. Okay. Now once it receives, the DMA controller will proceed to perform the request operation. Now once all the words has been transferred, the controller will inform the processor that by raising the interrupt signal means entire block has been transferred. So the processor can return to the program and that requested the transfer. So here it is a diagram of an DMA controller. There is a start and control bits, the starting address and word count. So two registers are used for storing the starting address and word count. The third register contains status and control flag. The bit determines the direction of transfers. Okay. So as you can see here, there is a status and control 0. It is a 32-bit data. Okay. So there are two registers are used for storing the starting address as well as the word count. Third register contains status and control flags. As you can see, there is a status and control flag. The bit determines the direction of transfer. Now when this bit is set to 1 by the program instruction, the controller will perform the read operation. That is, it transfer data from memory to the input devices. Otherwise it will perform write operation if it is set to 0. When the controller has completed transfer of block of data and is ready to receive another command, okay, so it sets the done flag to 1. Bit 30 is nothing but the interrupt enable flag, that is IE. So at 0 and 1, okay, the controller will perform the read operation. It transfers data from memory to the, otherwise it will perform a write operation. So read and write operation is at the second position, that is 1 bit. Suppose when the controller has completed transferring a block of data, okay, so that done flag which is at the 0th bit will be set to 1. Now bit 30, as you can see, is the interrupt enable flag as well as the called as IE. Now when this flag is set to 1, it causes the controller to raise an interrupt after it has completed transferring a block of data. Otherwise it will be set to 0. Now finally you can see there is a, at the 31st bit, the controller sets the IRQ bit set to 1 when it has requested an interrupt. So as we have discussed, IRQ bit is used for, is set only when it has requested an, when the device has requested an interrupt. So it is set to 1 when it has requested an interrupt. So a DMA controller connects to a high-speed network to the computer bus, as we discussed. So this controller contains two disks, as you can see. It also has capacity and provide two DMA channels. So DMA controller can handle two DMA channels. It can perform two DMA operations as if each disk has its own DMA controller. So register needs to store the memory address, word count, so on are duplicated. Now to start a DMA transfer of block of data from main memory to one of the disks, okay, the program writes the address and word count information into a register of the corresponding channel of the disk controller. It also provides the disk controller with information to identify the data for future retrieval. Now the DMA controller proceeds independently to implement the specific operation. That is, when the DMA transfer is completed, suppose this information is recorded in the status and control register of the DMA channel by setting done bit to 1. That is, DMA transfer has been completed. At the same time, suppose if interrupt enable flag is set to set, the controller sends an interrupt request to the processor and sets the IRQ bit. The status register can be used to record the other information as we have discussed. Now among different DMA devices, top priority is given to the high speed peripherals such as disk, high speed network, or graphical display device. So these are the DMA devices. Now the DMA controller can be set to steal memory cycles from the processor. So interviewing technique is called as cycle stealing. So here we have discussed about what is an exception, what is a DMA, that is direct memory access, working of DMA controller. Thank you.